It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
To the program, we've got Dan Subotnik. He's a professor of law at Touro Law School in Central Islip, New York. Dan, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, are you a former talk radio host? Did I hear something about that?
No, but I'll accept an offer.
That's fantastic. Well, sorry, I guess I got my facts confused there. But you are a professor of law, but more importantly, you are the author of a book called Toxic Diversity, Race, Gender, and Law Talk in America. Dan Subotnik, tell us about this book, Toxic Diversity. What made you want to write this?
Well, this book arose out of an idea that I have had many years ago, that people weren't speaking honestly about gender and race. I've written a lot about it, and I saw so much evidence to that effect that I decided to take a bunch of things I had been writing and bring them up to date, and I published this book. But again, it's all born out of the understanding that what we read about race and gender is specious, and it has to be interrogated, and that's what you guys are doing. That's what I do, and it's got to be done.
So when I just read, and I haven't read your book, but when I read the title, Toxic Diversity, one of the things that I've kind of come to accept, and this is a critical view of this idea of diversity, is because when I was right out of college, I worked for a university for a short time, and I quickly realized that diversity means people who look different but think the same. Can you speak to that?
Well, think the same with respect to each other, or with respect to the larger community. I mean, I need to know what you have in mind.
Well, from what I can tell is diversity. When people talk about, well, we need to diverse, they're really just talking about looks. They're not talking about ideas. They're not talking about ideas.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And we don't have. A lot of people have commented on it. It's almost a cliche now to say we don't have diversity of intellectual interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean they want. And do you see this as a left-right paradigm? You know, where we have people.
Yes, I do. It's the left that's squeezing to virtually eliminate all kinds of conversations about gender and again race. Sure, the right is much more willing to accept these kinds of conversations, and so the squeeze is from the left for sure.
Were you following what happened recently with Jussie Smollett case in Chicago?
Yes. And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when we talk about race and we talk about gender, I think gender applies here because, he was calling himself the gay Tupac. But it all, to me, I think it might have woken a lot of people up, Dan, in terms of people who think that, this country is just, full of a bunch of, racist, homophobic people. At least exposes this as an issue to use. A fake issue to use to to galvanize the public. It might be one of these moments where people are like, oh my gosh, this is getting out of hand.
I think you're right to an extent. I wouldn't go as far as you. I would say there is an issue there. There certainly is an issue about kind of anti-minority feeling, but at the same time, there's the other issue there. That needs to be discussed, the manipulation by minorities of public discourse, and both have to be on the table at the same time.
Well, so how do you square that? Let's talk about that. I mean,
that's a hard to square.
It is. I mean, I'm not saying there are no examples of racism or anti-minority sentiment, but I am the guy that's going to say, hey, listen. 8 years after September 11th, where terrorists knocked down our buildings, flew planes into our buildings, America elected a black guy by the name of Barack Hussein Obama. Not once, then they elected him twice. And I feel like that counts for something in terms of saying that, we have these racial problems that we've experienced in our past, the scars of our past, are not demonstrably better than what's portrayed in the mainstream media on a daily basis.
Well, I don't think anybody would disagree that things are better in terms of relations between minority and minority populations. But there's still problems, and serious problems. And the fact that they're better has actually encouraged people to speak up on the left and say, you know, we've gotten this far now, we've seen some progress, let's build on this and get more progress on the subject.
Yeah.
It's not inconsistent for those two things to exist at the same time.
What is, in your book, again, we're talking with Dan Subotnik.
Yeah.
He is a professor of law, and he's author of this book, Toxic Diversity, Race, Gender, and Law Talk in America. What's one of the main things you wanted to accomplish and communicate to the reader when you wrote this book?
Well, my latest thinking is on the subject of sexual assault, and and in fact, the official title of this discussion that we're having is "Start by Believing." And so I wrote something recently, last few months, in which I challenged a number of feminists who said that we have to start by believing women. I don't think we have to start by believing women. I think we have to start by listening to women and evaluating what they have to say. And that's my message, and I've written it up for your readers might be interested in the Turo Law Review in the winter issue of this year. And there's been a lot of interest in this topic. There's no question that. Well, let me put it this way. I want to. Do I have a little time here?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
All right. So here's the thing. The argument by feminist activists is that we should listen to women. We should believe women at the outset. But here's the problem. The people who know, and there are very few people with direct experience on this. I'm going to quote from a woman who was a dean at a law school who sat in on all kinds of panels in which she was adjudicating the issue of sexual assault. And here's what she says. And she says this recently, not in 1960. She expected to find widespread comfort with sexuality and confidence and sexual pleasure. But what she discovered was seemingly bottomless pits of shame. Imagine this in 2019, bottomless pits of shame. And this, of course, turned into a lot of complaints about sexual assault. And then she goes on and explains. This shame can lead to the enforcement regime being activated to vindicate honor, to vindicate the woman's honor, to feel some guilt, intense guilt in some cases, over their sexual behavior, provide identities of sexual innocence. Maybe mom thinks I wasn't playing by the rules, and so I'm going to say I was raped. Protect against jealousy. Protect young women from falling from someone's grace. Protect them from falling from good to slut. It's unbelievable. I mean, there are almost no people in America who are writing about what's going on the ground, in the trenches, in the adjudication trenches, both in the law school, not the law schools, the colleges and universities generally, and in the police department. I recently talked to a top cop in the area of sexual assault, and he says the same thing. Many women, not by no means all women, many women, enough to be worrisome. A number of women, he says, simply don't know what the criminal law says about sexual assault. What are the elements of sexual assault? And he finds this over and over again, and he wants this to get out to the public, as I'm doing here.
Okay, so when you say they don't understand the law, so maybe they're made uncomfortable around a man, and they somehow feel sexually threatened, and so they think that's a crime when there actually is no crime. That there is no.
Well, I think that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
interesting.
That's what he's saying. Yeah.
Interesting. So, what did you think about the Brett Kavanaugh situation?
Well, my take, and let's see how it matches up with yours, is that Brett Kavanaugh was involved in some rough horseplay with this woman. There was no attempted rape. And he should not have been charged with it, and he should have gone through a little more smoothly. I'm not saying he was a good guy. I mean, what he did was bad, but he was 17 years old at the time, and maybe we can forgive him since he's led a more or less a blameless life since. So
well, I see.
Yes,
if something did happen, I would tend to think that that's probably, that was probably the extent of it. But I think the credibility of that particular woman, it was called into question at some point.
It's possible. It's certainly possible. I'm thinking the best case scenario is that the best case scenario is that there was no attempted rape. Best case in the sense of finding him guilty.
Yeah. So
was that there was no rape. It's possible nothing happened. It's possible she made it all up. That would not be unheard of. It's
not unheard of. That's the issue. No. You have to have evidence. And if I would tell anything to young girls or to teenagers or whatever, when something happens, you need to go to the authorities sooner rather than later. Because that's when you can actually collect the evidence and see what's happened. Now here's the interesting thing, Dan, about this. Yeah. Okay, so Joe Biden is in the news, right? He's got these two women that have come out and said he made me uncomfortable. Now, I think I know why. These are women on the left. They don't think that Joe Biden is the man to get the Democrat nomination to try to challenge President Trump, and I understand that. However, there are a plethora of photos and videos of Joe Biden making women of all ages very uncomfortable. I don't know. Have you seen these where he's,
I have not.
Oh, man. I'm
going to have to look them up.
Yeah, you have to look them up. I guess my point is, and if you haven't seen them, then we can't really discuss it. But there's actually evidence of Joe Biden's past behavior that's out there, where he clearly touches people and makes them feel uneasy.
I know. I know. I had heard about it. I just don't want to speak about it because I haven't read it myself.
Yeah, I understand.
So, thank you for alerting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Go check it out. Yeah, the question is evidence.
Tell me what do you want to make out of Joe Biden? I'd be interested.
Oh, well, see, I don't really know. I'm just commenting on it. I don't think there's any crime that's been committed. Again, is it a crime to smell somebody's hair? But in the left, in today's, in their movement, they're going to destroy Joe Biden. Although, again, go watch those videos. It's extremely creepy of him interacting with some of these women. But my point is, you got to have evidence. Okay, if we're going to go forward, you're at some point you have to have something other than just your word, especially if it happened a long time ago.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm fighting. The idea that you don't have to have evidence. Believe women to start, and that solves the problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, that could just be we can't do that. And so at some point, we have the situation where is it because of a perceived oppressive patriarchal society that we now feel morally obligated to just believe whatever a woman says?
No, I think this is born out of a sense that the police and DAs have not been taking these complaints seriously when they come in, and so a very small, not a tiny fraction, but let's say this policeman I referred to a little while ago says that out of every 100 complaints that come in, 30 result in arrests. 30 in arrest, not in convictions, in arrests. That tells you something. It tells you that the way his department is looking at these things, either the women are not telling the truth or they're deceiving themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Either they're deliberately not telling the truth or they're deceiving themselves. And I think it's a combination of both, and there's good evidence that it's a combination of both.
Last question, Dan. We're talking with Dan Subotnik. Again, the title of your book, Toxic Diversity. Why'd you pick that title? What is toxic about diversity?
Well, because once you say diversity, all discussion shuts down. You can't say you don't like diversity. Diversity is an all-purpose good, so it's almost etched into the Declaration of Independence, so to speak. So that's why I chose diversity and toxic, because it leads to all kinds of destructive thinking and acts on the part of the people who hold those views. I mean, for example, women have a lot to do. The activities of women have a lot to do with the fact that they're sexual assaults. The typical case is a woman goes to a party and she gets drunk, and before you know it, she accepts an invitation or invites the guy into the bedroom. Now, I think I think that something has to be said to the women about this. You can't just do that and continue, and then the next day wake up and say, I was raped. That's not acceptable in this culture, and shouldn't be acceptable. And we have to alert the women and educate young women to the fact that they have obligations to say no, to walk out,
to not get drunk,
and not to get drunk, yes, and not to go into the guy's room in the first place, unless they understand that the pressure is going to be on. Which is not to say that the woman has no right to extricate herself from those situations.
Correct.
She does. But the point is, as a practical matter, it turns out that women aren't comfortable trying to extricate themselves from those situations. They feel they're in too deep. They owe the guy. In any event, there's a part of them that wants what's happening. They're enjoying what's happening. Part of them is enjoying it. And then after the fact, of course, the next morning, the day after that, they talk to their friend, and the friend say, "Oh no, you were raped," and that starts a whole chain of events.
Yeah,
it's unnecessary.
Dan Subotnik, it's certainly fascinating where we are, as a culture concerning this issue.
It is.
Your book, Toxic Diversity. You're a professor of law at Truro University and author of this book. Dan, it's been great to talk to you this morning. I appreciate it.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Yes, sir. Dan Subotnik, everybody.